The so-called US-Iran peace agreement is worse than toilet paper. Getting nothing out of it is an absolute disgrace for Trump. Yielding to Iran the label of coward is going to be slapped right onto his forehead very quickly. He has to win the midterm elections. If he doesn't, with all the enemies he's made, who knows how much trouble he'll be in, pumping crypto and manipulating the stock market. Even if you don't follow international politics, you'd notice that after Trump struck Iran, things went incredibly smoothly. It was badass. He took out all of Iran's top leaders. But after taking them out, he hesitated to launch a ground war because, well, the ones who needed to be taken out were already gone. What was left of Iran was, as their intelligence agencies, the US's own intelligence agencies put it, a centipede that is hard to kill. Iran's provinces and military districts were fighting independently. So, if you don't establish a new central government in Iran, or if you don't flatten Tehran with ground troops, you'll end up playing your cards wrong. The old saying, a surge of energy followed by a decline, and then total exhaustion, played out literally on Iranian soil. Then, of the war, Trump started announcing that a peace agreement was imminent and that the US was going to win big time. The stock market surged, oil prices plummeted, and then 2 days later, they started fighting again. Then he'd say, we must sign a peace agreement by Friday, or else civilization in Iran would be wiped out. And then, oops. The latest red line was last Friday. We are about to negotiate a peace agreement. Up until today. How many times has President Trump said that a peace agreement with Iran is imminent and that he's about to sign a permanent peace deal? 40 times. 40 times. This war has been going on for about 100 days. Yeah, just a bit over 100 days. Let's say 100 days on average. Every 2.5 to 3 days, President Trump announces that we are about to win big time. They signed a 14-point peace agreement last week. Once it was signed, wow, it blew up. Like throwing a massive brick into a cesspool. Because this peace agreement was signed at the G7 summit in Europe. It wasn't signed in the US. It wasn't signed in Iran. It wasn't even signed in Turkey. It was signed on European soil. The expression on Secretary of State Rubio's face standing behind him was highly nuanced. Because Rubio is a seasoned politician, not an actor. He's an insider. Let's first look at the reports from our Chinese language media. According to C Readers, over the past 24 hours, multiple international media outlets reported that due to regional tensions and disagreements between the two sides, the high-level US-Iran talks scheduled in Switzerland might fall through. Because they had just agreed. Agreed to what? They had just agreed to hammer out a specific peace agreement within 60 days. To reach a specific so-called nuclear control agreement, how to transfer and manage Iran's nuclear materials, how to unfreeze their money. Unfreezing $150 billion for Iran, or was it $300 billion in aid? Anyway, right after they signed it, I remember the day they signed it. I wasn't streaming. I had a buddy of mine ask me. I said, impossible. Why will Israel definitely flip the table? The US is the big boss, and Israel is the right-hand man up front. The boss and his right-hand man go to smash a joint. Bang, 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 they smash the place up. The big boss turns around and runs away, leaving the right-hand man still standing in the joint. How is the right-hand man supposed to handle that? If you run away and the right-hand man backs down, it's like Chan Ho-nam running away and leaving chicken alone in crow's territory. It's so awkward. Israel is deeply compromised, which is why Israel will not let this go. In Israel right now, both the ruling party and the opposition are filled with outrage this past week. Netanyahu has been reduced to looking like a coward. Netanyahu is actually known for being quite hardline. But because of this incident, he looks completely weak. Everyone is cursing him as a traitor, a capitulator. So I told them, I said they will definitely start fighting again. And before I even finished speaking, the very next day, Israel unleashed a chaotic barrage of attacks on Hezbollah. So, the US striking the Iranian soil was genuinely saving a bit of face for the US in the end. Because Israel is a Jewish state, its influence in traditional US political spheres surpasses that of any other country. Russia, China, none of them come close. France, Italy. Nope, Israel is the #1 lobbying group. So on this issue, if Israel disagrees, Netanyahu originally came from special forces, a ruthless operator. And what has he been turned into? He's been turned into what of now? In other words, Israel's most aggressive, combative warrior is now considered a dove. Therefore, this so-called US-Iran peace agreement is fundamentally worse than toilet paper. That's the quality of it. So meanwhile, both sides are preparing to negotiate again in Switzerland. At the same time, Israel and Hezbollah officially reached a ceasefire agreement yesterday, June 19th, which means the US is in turn forcing Netanyahu to play along. As the battlefield situation cools down, Trump's MAGA faction is pressuring Israel to make peace, so diplomatic channels have reopened. And the Middle East situation has seen an unprecedented de-escalation. Oil tankers are starting to move back and forth again. Yesterday alone, over 20 ships passed through. And the International Maritime Organization says there are actually more. Why? Because for safety, many oil tankers turned off their AIS transponders, so they don't show up on the IMO's radar. But that doesn't mean the ships aren't passing. The real number is likely far more than 20. This means the Strait of Hormuz is unfreezing. Our gas prices here in Vancouver have already dropped from $2.20 or $2.10 down to $1.80 DH. The Pakistani Navy reminded everyone not to get careless, because the Pakistani Navy discovered floating sea mines in the Strait of Hormuz yesterday. They warned oil tankers and commercial ships to stay on high alert to avoid hitting mines. While war risk insurance premiums have slightly decreased, and all these tankers carry war risk insurance, it's still far from normal levels. So the next 60 days, stipulated by the 14 articles of the so-called Year on Peace Agreement, are the critical phase determining the trajectory of the Middle East. It was signed around June 15th. That means around August 15th will be the real turning point. The UK's Guardian reported that Iran might make Trump the Carter he never wanted to be. What does this mean? This shows the caliber of legacy financial media. I mean the power of legacy news media. Because they remember, during the 1980 Iran hostage crisis, when the Shah fell, the hostage crisis targeting the US Embassy happened. The one in 1980. Hollywood even made a movie about it when US diplomats fled to the Canadian Embassy. Trump fiercely criticized the sitting president at the time, Jimmy Carter. The very Iran agreement signed by President Trump might stain him with the exact same blemish, giving Tehran the leverage to dictate his historical legacy. What does this mean? In October 1980, they dug it up. In October 1980, during an NBC interview, Trump strongly slammed Carter. He said Carter appeared helpless in the face of Iran's rogue actions of seizing the embassy and kidnapping diplomats. As everyone knows, the U.S. Embassy in Tehran was seized in 1979, and 52 diplomats were held hostage. They were held for 444 days. During this time, Trump said, "Our seizing of our hostages is absolutely ridiculous. This kind of crisis can only be resolved through military action by launching a war and invading Iran, not through diplomatic channels." Less than a month after Trump said that, Carter lost the election in a landslide to his Republican rival, Ronald Reagan. Carter went down in history as the symbol of a weak American president. Whenever people mention softy or coward, Carter comes to mind. We all know Reagan's stance. Though he was an actor, he was a deeply conservative politician. 被搞出了the years of turbulence and hostility between the US and Iran, and possibly sparked Trump's long journey of interest and involvement in politics. Trump and his alias decided to attack the Islamic regime in Iran and launch a war, but the war would end clearly spiraled out of control. We all know that when the war with Iran started, Trump was highly confident, saying this war would be textbook. Just watch. That it would end at a miraculous speed, but it lost control. It didn't end on schedule as Trump's team had modeled. Moreover, Iran demonstrated extreme resilience. While the U.S. war, showed a fatal weakness, a lack of resilience and endurance. When they first struck, it was like a thunderbolt, but then it fizzled out. They couldn't sustain it. Trump had repeatedly attacked Carter. Then was a man who led a second-rate rogue regime to find him and ultimately destroy his presidency. This definition Trump gave Carter is very likely to become Trump's own. A self-fulfilling prophecy. He has fallen into his own trap, so Trump today, much like Carter back then, is involuntarily endorsing the legitimacy of this evil Iranian regime. What does legitimacy mean? It's the law of the fist. You fought them and couldn't win. Damn it, you wanted to wipe them out, but you failed. So now they exist legally. Carter did this. And now Trump is repeating the exact same mistake. So on the 17th, sorry, I said the 15th earlier, my bad, on the 17th. Signed the so-called 14-article MOU. And Article 2 states that, and Article 2 states, the U.S. and Iran commit to respecting each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and to avoid interfering in each other's internal affairs. The wording of this sentence is an absolute disgrace for Trump. because Iran's dictatorial rogue theocratic regime does not possess legitimacy. So when you, Trump eagerly and enthusiastically launch a war against Iran, only to follow it up with an article to saying, the US and Iran respect each other's territorial and sovereign integrity and avoid interfering in internal affairs. That kind of wording is undoubtedly a security guarantee and an endorsement of legitimacy for the Iranian theocratic regime. So, this memorandum has left all people in the world who support justice, including all the Iranian diaspora and Iranian descent living overseas, including the millions of Iranians in Canada and the US. I tell you, Iranian Americans will never vote for Trump again. This is democratic politics. This rapidly fractures Trump's base. The white voters chanting, America first, opposed this war from the very beginning. Traditional Republican hawks on Iran initially supported the war, but now they sense something creeping into the MHEA party that is worse than anything in Trump's eyes. Weakness. In the eyes of traditional American Republicans, to ensure the Strait of Hormuz remains open is giving up all his leverage at any cost. He's yielding to Iran. The Strait of Hormuz was open before the war even started. Now, it's not just major US media rushing to declare that Trump lost this war. The war itself has pushed Trump into unprecedented territory. The softy label he once used to brand others will quickly be slapped right onto his own forehead. So despite the two sides signing an MOU, the Iranian leaders, just like the Khomeini regime in 1979, still maintain high vigilance against the West. But this time, the leverage they hold is time. The leverage isn't the US embassy in Tehran, it's total control over the Strait of Hormuz. This is leverage the Iranian theocratic regime never had before. It means if I say I'm closing the Strait of Hormuz, I'll close it. I can dictate the success or failure of the global economy. The moment I close the strait, oil goes up. Inflation shoots up. The US economic pressure becomes unbearable, and the US will have to drop to its knees. In other words, the current state of this war puts Trump at an extremely disadvantageous position. If we understand Western democratic politics, we know, democracy is more prone to launching for unwars than dictatorships. It sounds completely counter-tuitioning and illogical because democracies are supposed to love peace, and tyrannical dictatorships are the ones that want to start wars. The reality is the exact opposite. In fact, from the democratic era of ancient Greece up to today, the noise in democratic parliaments, the political contradictions in democratic nations are easily diffused by authorizing the president or parliament to declare war. For the specific academic analysis of this political and historical dynamic, read Liu Zongjing, Anti-Liu. Anti-Liu has previously provided an extremely detailed and authoritative analysis on this, so we've witnessed with our own eyes how the US under democratic politics uses war as a weapon to solve its internal problems, and how easily this backfires. Like a boomerang, it slaps right back into the president's face. Regarding a certain major country not fighting foreign wars, you're absolutely right. China doesn't launch foreign wars throughout Chinese history. It's not easy to start a foreign war. Why? No one understands the risks of a foreign war better than a tyrant in a dictatorship. Because he's too comfortable. He lives like an emperor. It's better than being God. Are you going to make him take on the risks of a war? That's impossible. But a democratic parliament, holy crap. You call me a coward, I call you a coward. Parliament, and the parliament hijacks the regime to start a war, and these wars have no single person responsible. No one is personally liable. It's a legal process approved by the parliament, authorized by the Congress or the Senate. There's no one strictly accountable. In the end, they just send professional soldiers to fight. This is democratic politics. You see it time and time again in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. During their democratic eras, the frequency of war exceeded that of their imperial eras. Rome is a perfect living example. Republican Rome was highly belligerent, but after transitioning to an empire, its wars became very, very conservative. Or you could say they became defensive wars, punitive expeditions. Whereas in the Republican era, its wars were expansionist, aggressive, resource extraction wars. Alright, so the national strength of the US has yielded a very, very clear answer through this era on war. American national strength can no longer sustain a protracted war of attrition. The US's national strength has truly declined. It is no longer the America of 1940, not even the America of 1966, nor the America of 1990. Its political influence, its international rallying power, its so-called political correctness among allies, its major corporations are not enough to support it launching a war. A real war, an annihilation-level war. Remember the 90 seconds when they obliterated Iraq? How many allied and vassal states helped them from a massive coalition? But the war he launched against Iran today is an unjust war. There is no coalition of the willing, no allied forces involved. It's just him and Israel, acting more like a pair of clowns. If you're going to launch a war like this against Iran, you absolutely must rally all Western developed democracies under the US banner. But today's America no longer has the capability to go it alone. So he only lasted 100 days in Iran before he couldn't hold on anymore. This is the state of US national power. This war in Iran was originally meant for Trump to cover up the so-called, the Epstein Island scandal. Yeah, Trump is under massive pressure, although I've never really believed Trump went to that island to do those things. The liberal media in the US has been relentlessly presenting evidence, constantly putting out documents, though of course they're redacted, an A4 page, roughly 2/3 blacked out. So, facing unprecedented pressure from liberals, we Chinese are relatively conservative, so our Chinese media basically doesn't report on these things. But the reality is, the domestic pressure in the US is immense. So he diverts attention, shifts the pressure. With the war on Iran, he thought since he scored big points after hitting Venezuela, looking incredibly tough, he hoped to do it again in Iran to make it look spectacular if he had won in Iran. His midterm elections and term elections would be secured. But he didn't expect this exam paper in Iran to be completely botched. It's really not secured. We are looking at these pieces one by one by one. One is the decline of US national strength, which is the macro background. The Iran strategy fell apart and was botched. That's an accidental factor right now. And another massive backdrop is governing by Twitter. The helplessness and the truth of democratic politics hidden behind it. For example, why do I now have deep reflections on Trump? I'm no longer just cursing him or praising him. Because I'm also entering politics now. I'm participating in politics. I can say I'm facing the exact same situation as Trump. Sure, his is a massive enterprise and mine is a tiny. HES got a huge deal, but the nature of it is exactly the same. A sparrow and a phoenix share the same fundamental nature. You are not an insider of this circle. The bipartisan democratic system in the US has been running for so many years. All US presidents have either been governors or senators. They are definitively the political backbone, or elite cultivated by the two parties over many years. But Trump has no friends in Washington. He said it himself. I don't have a single friend in Washington. Because he's a real estate developer from New York, he's a businessman. If you guys keep messing around like this, and he actually did it, and he actually did it, and he actually did it, and he actually won. So when he entered this American political machine, he was completely lacking his own team, his own crew, and entirely lacking experience. He didn't even have the basic common sense for it because completely different fields feel worlds apart. That's why his first term was so chaotic. And in his first term, he had to compromise with the establishment. For example, his alliance with Mitch McConnell, his alliance with Nikki Haley, his falling out with that old witch Nancy Pelosi, this was all out of helplessness. If he had his own strong team, you wouldn't see one elite after another from his administration turning against him 2 months into the job and writing memoirs cursing him after they leave. So now I feel Trump's helplessness is that he wants to deliver a spectacular exam paper. He wants to make America great again. A deeply entrenched political machine in the US. He's simply not from that circle. To the point where he has to use his own family members. He has to use amateurs. So this might be the other truth. The democratic system in the US requires you to hand in an exam paper. Every 2 years, the midterms and the final exam every 3 years. And the midterms are right around the corner. Every 2 years is a midterm election. November 3rd, 2026, the US midterm elections. He is currently facing such a predicament. What is the right thing to do? I mean, putting all distractions aside. What is the right approach? What is the right approach? Stop the attacks on Iran or the launch of a comprehensive, coalition-based war against Iran. This war must be just, it must have UN authorization. It must have all allies supporting the launch of a full-scale war to eradicate the Thicards. Can you? Why can't you? Because you've already offended everyone you possibly could. On the other hand, what should be done regarding economics and trade? Immediately stop the pointless trade wars. This trade war was launched by Trump after he took office, targeting the whole globe. At first, he said it was against China and his first term was mainly aimed at China. But into his second term, inexplicably, he doubled down on almost all allies, being even harsher on them than on China. This kind of trade war actually, since the very first day I hosted this show, you can check my history. I have never said this. I'm a finance and economics guy. I'm telling you, this trade war is absolutely wrong. It's no different from Empress Dowager Cixi declaring war on the whole world. The U.S. fiscal deficit will not be solved one bit by a global trade war. Whether it's Warren Buffett or a Chinese financial scholar or practitioner like me, we've all said, Warren Buffett used something called the import certificates, IC or something. He designed a very clever mechanism back then, in saying what should be utilized. A currency war should be utilized. Force the RMB into free trade and free exchange rather than slapping tariffs on China. Only by letting the RMB float freely can the true industrial competitiveness between the two countries be reflected. So stop the trade war against China, but the trade war against China, but the trade war against all countries. Lower the price of oil. Oil at $100 or $200 inherently equates to comprehensive inflation. Because oil is the blood of industry, almost everything means to be pegged to oil. Can you execute these measures? If you truly want to make America great, you should enter a US dollar interest rate hike cycle. Because the dollar can no longer be recklessly printed. The dollar needs credit. You need to rebuild its credit and promote global trade rather than halting it. Because you are the world leader, and global trade is settled in dollars. You need to restore the glory of the dollar, its credibility. Then you promote global trade, and ultimately it's America that benefits. You need to lower oil prices, not do the opposite. You either obliterate Iran or stop. Just don't fight Iran. Either don't fight or wipe out the country. Can you do any of these things? Not a single one. That is why today the immense pressure of the U.S. midterm elections is manifested. How important is this November 3rd midterm election? Let me tell you all. It determines the direct control of both the House and the Senate in the U.S. Congress by the two parties. Which means, if he loses the House and Senate, there's no point in Trump being president anymore because Parliament won't agree to anything he wants to do. The House of Representatives has to elect all its seats. There are 435 seats in the U.S. House, and all of them are up for election on November 3rd this year. The Senate has to replace 1/3 of its members. There are about 100 senators. The U.S. Senate will replace 35 seats this time, and 39 governorships will be up for grabs. Governors in most states will be replaced. That is the pressure of this midterm election on Trump. And that's just the internal pressure. He must win the midterms. If he doesn't win, he really might. Don't think it was just a given that he didn't go in after his first term. How many enemies has he made? He played too big this time. Especially in his second term, he took it way too far. Pumping crypto, manipulating war and peace. Anyone with eyes can see it. It didn't happen in the first term. He was relatively cautious then. But in the second term, we can all see it like, holy shit. Little Baron is the god of stocks, the god of crypto. So with these things, his political enemies will very likely take revenge. If they can't get to him, can't they get to his kids? So that's the internal aspect. Now, the external pressure. Old Wang, go save Trump, save my ass. I can't even save Zhang Yu XIA. The most important external pressure comes from Israel. This is a solidified pressure. Everyone knows Israel has a doctrine. If a country has a doctrine, it has a soul. Why is Israel so good at fighting? Israel has a doctrine called the Begin Doctrine. To translate the Begin Doctrine into plain speak, Israel cannot tolerate poor neighbors. No, it means Israel cannot tolerate nuclear neighbors. Whoever dares to possess nuclear weapons around Israel, I don't care who they are, I will wipe them out. That is the essence of the Begin Doctrine. Look back at their determination. June 17, 1981. Broad daylight, clear skies, peace. Everyone is eating hot pot in the Middle East, singing songs. And suddenly Israel launches Operation Babylon. The target was Iraq. Saddam Hussein was ruling Iraq at the time. It was booming. Iraq was very close to France, wearing the same pair of pants. Israel didn't hesitate to kill French experts, deploying F-15 seconds, and the most advanced F-16 formations of the time, to launch a devastating strike against the French-built Iraq nuclear reactor in Iraq. They completely destroyed Iraq's nuclear capabilities. That was the first enforcement of the Begin Doctrine. September 5, 2007, late at night, a group of unmarked aircraft, through a beautiful left hook, flew a massive arc and struck in the dead of night. Syria's Assad regime was still in its prime back then. eating hot pots, singing songs. They struck Syria's hidden nuclear facilities in the eastern desert. The engineers and scientists who built the Syrian nuclear facility were all killed in the bombing. Those people weren't North Koreans. Operation Orchard wasn't publicly disclosed until 2018. That is, just recently disclosed. We remember the ones that followed. April 2024, a sudden strike on nuclear facilities inside Iran, followed by June 2025. Less than a year later, launching a massive 12-day war, the so-called Lion's Rise plan. Israel bombed all the nuclear facilities, nuclear experts, and generals hiding deep inside Iran's mountain caves. In other words, look, Israel won't hesitate to use surgical strikes against any country. They don't give a damn. I only hit Iran. I only hit Iran. Or I only hit Iran. Whoever gets strong, whoever dares to build them. I tell you, if Egypt had them, they would definitely bomb Egypt. That's the Begin doctrine. So do you think if Trump offends Israel by unilaterally making peace with Iran without completely cleaning out Iran's nuclear facilities, without treating them like family heirlooms to be systematically destroyed, will Israel just let it go? Will Israel not use political means to influence American domestic politics? So the external conflict and pressure of U.S.-Iran disagreements is a major crux. And the external pressure is Israel. So when we look at today's so-called Iran nuclear agreement, we just smile slightly. The Iran peace talks are fundamentally just another amateur hour. It's completely unrealistic. These 14 articles are unrealistic, and nothing will be achieved in these 60 days. I can leave my words right here. Absolutely nothing will be achieved. Why? Because Trump, to quickly solve domestic issues, quickly presented a pretty combination punch. A pretty exam paper. Look, I brought unprecedented peace. But how could Iran possibly hand over their 9, of which 440 tons is already weapons grade? How could they give it to you? And if they don't give it to you, how could Israel possibly let it go? Therefore, inevitably, they either sign a fake peace agreement, which will turn into waste paper and lightning-fast night bombings right after the next round of midterms, or the peace agreement simply won't be signed, and then you lose your midterm elections. It's impossible to win. It's impossible for a situation to emerge where, wow, America won big time. Because now you've seen clearly you were choked. This military operation lacked decisive, swift execution. During the first 10 days, the first 7 days when you had Iran stunned, you had zero ground troops, not even the establishment of a puppet army or a puppet regime. Nothing, so Iran quickly restored order. What do you do then? Trump is not a politician. Without Israel, the world would be at peace. The time the earth existed without Israel was very long. And look, it wasn't at peace either. World War I. Neither involved Israel. Was the earth at peace then? Were both world wars caused by Israel? You people? Your knowledge. You need some basic knowledge. You need to brush up. JFK got his head blown off, and subsequent presidents have been trembling. Exactly. That is the problem. As my desire to run for office deepens, as my understanding of Richmond grows, as my understanding of municipal platforms deepens, I know all too well the difficulty and risks of an outsider trying to change this political system. It is extremely risky, but I will definitely do it. Are you saying you're better than Trump? No, because my goal is much smaller than Trump's. It's just a county. To put it bluntly, isn't it just a county? It would be a small county. Oh, I exaggerated. 200,000 population, that's a township. To townships. So, as a township mayor, I think I can still overcome these risks. The Jewish diaspora is very powerful. Exactly. If he doesn't help Israel, he will definitely lose the midterms. You're absolutely right. If he doesn't help Israel, furthermore, he'll lose all the Iranian American votes. There are a lot of Iranian Americans, and they are all naturalized citizens, unlike us Chinese Americans who often don't naturalize.